Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing our deep dive into this Oregon Ducks program, heading into spring practice, fall camp, the 2024 season. Dill, we took a look at the offensive line. We've taken our deep dive into the defensive line. Now we're talking about the offensive skill positions for the Oregon Ducks, and you talk about just pure talent. And I've had a lot of conversations with the Oregon fans in the comment section. This is purely one of the most talented offenses that you'll see in 2024. Really excited to get into this. Obviously, talking about the quarterback position, a loaded wide receiver room, and talk about kind of the different ways this Oregon team is going to be able to hurt opposing defenses in 2024. Extremely excited to get into this one. A lot of names to talk about. We'll try to be as brief as possible. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a massive shout out to the Oregon Duck fans. I mean, these deep dives have been a blast for the boys. The amount of support you guys have shown, whether we're doing these deep dives, transfer portal, high school recruiting, cannot thank you guys enough. All the Go Ducks, that stuff means the world to the boys. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, we will be giving you guys our leading receivers and our leading rushers for this Oregon Ducks team in 2024. Would love to hear from you guys as well, your predictions in the comment section. And Dill, let's start off with the position that, I mean, at this point seems like old news, but you're bringing in two massive additions in this quarterback room, and Dillon Gabriel and Dante Moore. I'll give you the T-box for these quarterbacks here.
I mean, it's a fun room because, again, it's kind of like what you were telling me pre-show and like what we were talking about. You got a combination of guys with Dillon Gabriel who has an ultra high floor. I mean, you just know he's going to come in, be ultra productive if he ends up being the guy. But I don't think you should sleep on Dante Moore maybe being QB1, because you kind of take a guy who's now got a lot of experience, kind of gone through his lumps in a system that was brutally difficult. I don't think they had the wide receiver talent necessarily at times. They certainly didn't have the offensive line. So he kind of, I mean, he's grown up pretty quick, I'd say. In that type of scheme with Oregon runs under Will Stein, and with that amount of talent and with that good of an offensive line, I mean, that would excite me if Dante Moore tried out there.
I would love to hear from the Oregon fans, because I knew you were going to go that way. Dill's been as Michigan fans. Dante Moore's been on our radar for 3-4 years at this point. And so Dill is a Dante Moore guy, and I'm quite frankly a Dante Moore guy as well. I personally think it's going to be Dillon Gabriel. You even listen to why Dante Moore came to Oregon. Like, he wants to get developed. And I think you have a perfect quarterback runway where Dillon Gabriel is the guy in 2024. And then in 2025, you have Dante Moore. I'd love to hear from Oregon fans in terms of the discussion around Dillon Gabriel, Dante Moore. Dill, focusing on Dillon Gabriel, two things that really jump out. One, it is just hard to find 6-year quarterbacks that have thrown for almost 15,000 yards, 125 touchdowns. You go back to 2023, completed 70% of his balls for 3,600 yards and 30 touchdowns. It's just hard to find quarterbacks with that much productivity and that much experience. I think, one, Dillon Gabriel fits what Oregon wants to do on the offensive side of the football extremely well. You got all these playmakers, get them the ball quickly, on time, accurately, exactly what Bo Nix did. I think, one, from a style of quarterback, he's a perfect fit. But more importantly, what made Bo Nix so great in Oregon for 2023, I think it was the experience. I mean, you saw there was not a situation, there was not a defense that really rattled Bo Nix. And so I think Dillon Gabriel, with all of that experience going into his 6th year of college football, having played as much as he has, this is an Oregon team that, I've said it, probably going to be my pick to win the Big Ten. And I think you want a 6-year senior quarterback that has done it time and time again at the college football level, kind of leading this offense here.
Yeah, and with all those weapons, I kind of get what you're saying for sure, because like when you're stuck in that, that's where Dillon Gabriel thrives. Again, he's not necessarily the guy who's going to take over an average team and elevate them to being like great, like maybe a Caleb Williams type player, but stick him in an offense that's well coached, runs well, and has a lot of talent around him. That's where he thrives, and that's basically Oregon to a T. They're as talented as anyone on the offensive side of the ball, and their offensive line's really, really good. So I'm kind of with you. I do think Dillon Gabriel makes so much sense. He was such a big ad, and again, I think people are sleeping on it a little bit because of Dante Moore. And Dante Moore certainly gets the blood flowing a little bit. I mean, he is an exciting player, but Dillon Gabriel's, I mean, he's such a big-time player. I feel like people forget about him.
Yes, 100% agree. I mean, I read the stats. Like, it's, again, hard to find quarterbacks with that much productivity. He's been great as a college football quarterback. And I've seen the Oregon fans and their maybe question marks about Dillon Gabriel and what that ceiling looks like. And my argument to that would be, or at least my comment, not necessarily an argument, because I'm not going to argue that Dante Moore probably has the more talented arm, but in this offense, with guys that we're about to talk about in this wide receiver room, I mean, Dillon Gabriel, that is his perfect offense. He's a guy that's going to be a distributor, a point guard of that offense, and that's for this Oregon offense. And that's really all you need in 2024. This will be one of the best offenses in the country. And Dill, a perfect segue to this wide receiver room, where I don't even know where to begin, but I'm going to go with Tez Johnson. And this is a guy that you talk about who I think will be the leading receiver for this Oregon Ducks team in 2024. I'm going with Tez Johnson. I think that's a hot take because a lot of people would go with Evan Stewart, who is phenomenally talented. We'll talk about him. Dill, you go back to Dillon Gabriel and his time at Oklahoma. Who was his favorite target? It was the slot Drake Stoops. And I think Tez Johnson, quite frankly, and this is not a disrespect to Drake Stoops, who's going to go to the NFL and have a good career, Tez Johnson is Drake Stoops with more juice. I mean, those short intermediate routes, those timing stuff, letting him get the football out quick, and the ability for Tez Johnson to work after the catch. I mean, I think that is a match made in heaven, and I think you might be looking at one of the better quarterback wide receiver duos that we see in 2024 with DG and Tez Johnson.
You know, I'm in a guy who, again, really experienced. I think another kind of one of those like flying under the radar, not ads, but like a guy.
Yeah, that's another point to this. Still, all the sorry to interrupt you here, but all the hype is Oregon's done bringing in these 11 transfers, and these guys are legit very good players that are coming into this program. Getting back a guy like Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, some of those guys on defense, some of the best moves that Oregon has made is keeping some of Terrence Ferguson. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. Some of the best moves Oregon has made is keeping these guys for one more year. Sorry, I'll let you continue though.
No, and that's what I was going to say. Like a guy who's just wildly experienced in this offense is always kind of in the right spot. And I'm with you. I mean, Evan Stewart, I do think it's huge to get that number one guy. I love Trayshawn Holden. I don't know that he is optimally used as that true number one. Evan Stewart, I mean, he's as talented as a wideout I've seen in a while in terms of how dynamic he is, can get down the field, play vertically, also can work underneath and run after the catch. I mean, just a really complete, really dynamic wide receiver. But I think he opens it up for everyone else. I think Trayshawn Holden should be able to eat. I think Tez Johnson should be able to eat. And I think Terrence Ferguson, I think all three of those guys really benefit from having a true number one.
And again, I think the most exciting narrative moving on from Tez Johnson is, I mean, Evan Stewart, I don't think we've seen the full extent of Evan Stewart because he's been kind of not rotten away, but kind of just lost in that Texas A&M offense. That's been brutal. And so now why does he want to come to Oregon? Because he saw what Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin were able to do last year. That's an offense that he wants to play in. That's an offense where he's going to be used the right way. And I think you said it best. When you have a guy like Evan Stewart where safeties need to be all over, I mean, guys like Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden work in the middle of the field. That's a nice segue to a guy like Trayshawn Holden, who I think is just a kind of, again, going under the radar because Tez Johnson and Troy Franklin were those guys. When Trayshawn Holden got his opportunity, he was a difference maker for this Oregon team. I expect a massive year from Trayshawn Holden. And you talk about those three receivers, you still got some other guys. I mean, you got a five-star in Jerrion Dickey who might be taking that step going into year two. A ton of talent in this wide receiver room. I think you know who your top three are going into the year, but some young talent beneath that really could be taking that step as well going into 2024.
And you can throw another guy in, your guy Gary Bryant. And again, maybe not the pure wide receiver that those other three are, but if you can get him the ball in space, he is very dynamic. And that's what he specializes in. And that's why I want to see him used maybe a little more. I think they did try to put him out there and play pure wide receiver. He's fine at that, but I don't think he's quite in the league of the other three. And he is really good when you can get him in space. And I wonder if they can do that a little more.
And that's not even a knock on Gary Bryant as much. Gary Bryant's going on and starting for a lot of Power 5 programs across
the other three are just awesome.
It's just you're looking at like three of, I think, definitely two in Tez Johnson and Evan Stewart. And again, I think Trayshawn Holden is going to wake a lot of people up as well. That is a loaded wide receiver room. And then you go to the tight end room. And you have a guy like Terrence Ferguson, who, again, probably would have gone day 2, early day 3 in the NFL draft. He comes back. You talk about working that middle of the field. Dillon Gabriel, loving to work the middle, going to those short intermediate route trees. A guy like Terrence Ferguson, I think, absolutely feasts in this offense. And then, Dill, I'm going to throw out Kenyon Sadiq, a guy that from Idaho, Sioux Falls, Idaho, I believe, is a guy that is a difference maker from an athletic standpoint. You saw the flashes in the bowl game. Another guy that I'm not sure how much he's going to play because Terrence Ferguson is very, very good, but a guy that if you can get on the field and let him kind of be a matchup nightmare for linebackers and safeties, another weapon for Dillon Gabriel to get the ball to.
And frankly, I would think there's room for him to play because Terrence Ferguson is, I mean, what's so good about him is his hands are just unbelievable.
Phenomenal. The catch
makes really good catches through traffic. Not the elite athlete, but solid, like definitely not like a problem. Not like an Austin Stogner maybe from Oklahoma where you notice like, ooh, this guy's not moving.
Ricochet shot for Austin Stogner.
Like again, that's obviously Dillon Gabriel's Oklahoma 10. Like he's an upgrade from that. I think he moves well enough, but you kind of throw in a Kenyon Sadiq. I mean, that's a unique player. He moves the way I think you want to see tight ends move in today's game.
And we kind of have this conversation. We'll get into the running backs. This conversation of, do you have wide receivers that can do different things? I think Oregon certainly checks that box. I mean, you have your true, in my opinion, that prototypical wide receiver one in Evan Stewart. And then you have, again, a guy that I think Tez Johnson is going to lead this team in receiving yards. Evan Stewart is going to open up that middle of the field. You're going to have Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, I think, really eating up underneath. You love how the wide receivers really balance each other. And getting back to the point of how this Oregon team can attack defenses so many different ways. And, oh, yeah, you have one of the best offensive coordinators for my money using all of these weapons. Now, the last conversation we have to go to, Dill, is the running back position. You lose a guy like Bucky Irvin, who many of you guys know I'm a massive fan of. He's going to have another phenomenal NFL career. Put some respect on James Jordan. This is a guy that I thought probably should have been used a little bit more in 2023. Average 7.1 yards per carry. And the narrative around James Jordan is he's the short yardage back. I think he can be a bell cow back. This was a guy that hits the hole extremely hard. He likes to get downhill. Invite contact is really kind of underrated in how he's utilized and how he can make people miss in space and behind the offensive line. That I think is going to be really good for Oregon. And I think you're looking at one of the better rushing attacks as well with a guy like Jordan James leading.
Before I get too deep into respecting Jordan James's name, I mean, it is Jordan James, not James Jordan. So maybe you got to put a little respect on his name. But going into obviously, like you're right. I mean, a really, really good running back, really explosive through the hole. I think that's where he really shines, it feels like he gets what he should get out of each run. He doesn't leave a ton of meat on the bones. You're like, oh man, why didn't you get 4 there instead of 1? Or why didn't you get 6 there instead of 3? I thought he did a really good job. Contact balance for the size, really good. And then I also think it's important that he catches the ball well. Bucky Irvin caught the ball really well. I think Jordan James can catch the ball really well. And in that scheme, it matters a lot that these guys can do that. And he can do it.
Jordan James. Yes. The two first names got me. That's a trick. That's a tricky one. And again, I shouldn't be messing that up because I think Jordan James is an absolute dude, but the 2 first names got me. Dill, I'll throw out 2 more too. Noah Whittington coming back from injury. Another, I mean, he was a guy that was on pace to be kind of that 3-headed monster for the Oregon Ducks in 2023 before the injury. You bring in a guy like Jay Harris through the portal, 6'2", 215 pounds. I mean, I'm starting to look at this offense and saying, where is the cracks in the armor? We did the offensive line. That's a phenomenal unit. This wide receiver unit, you might be looking at one of the most talented groups in the country, a loaded quarterback room, loaded running back room. Dill, we'll end it with this question. Leading receiver, leading rusher for the Oregon Ducks in 2024. Let's hear it.
I mean, I think the leading rusher is very obvious. Will be Jordan.
Agreed.
He is the clear number 1 in my mind. For the wide receiver, I think it's going to be East Stu. And I love Taz. He's obviously awesome. I just think Evan Stewart, I mean, I remember last year I was thinking we talk a lot about some of these other guys, Marvin Harrison, Roman.
Dill's on record. Yeah, I'll cut you off. Dill's on record saying it's Marvin Harrison Jr. and Evan Stewart.
I mean, he's that explosive. He can make circus catches down the field. Not quite the size those other guys are, but probably runs better with the ball than all 3 of those top wide receivers in this draft. I mean, he's really, really good. And you're kind of right. We don't know really what he can be because he was stuck in Texas A&M where they just never really got anything going explosively and always felt like they're playing in a rut. It just never looked good like Oregon.
Jordan James for me, for sure, leading rusher. And Dill, I'm going to go with Tez Johnson. And if this is you wanted to put Evan Stewart, you want to put Tez Johnson. I think those are the clear first 2 options. I just am in love with the relationship I think you're going to see between Dillon Gabriel and Tez Johnson. I think that is going to be one of the more dynamic wide receiver quarterback batteries that you see in college football. So give me Tez Johnson. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. Again, appreciate all the support you guys have shown the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.